Friday, so it's time for Nerder. She wrote. I'm your host, Mo Nikhil, and Seth Partnow is my colleague today. Unfortunately, Dave Dufour couldn't join us, and this is a very special episode. But before we get to the reasons why this is special, Seth, do you understand now this is how you do the intro?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Go check out our Summer League episode, folks, where Seth just completely botched the intro when he told Dave, I really want to try the intro and screwed it up. But that's how you do it, Seth.
I may or may not have forgotten what entity we're recording this for.
I mean, yeah, it was pretty epic. It was pretty great. And you are listening to us on the Athletic Podcast Network. And today we're going to talk to Seth and this is really an interview, almost an interrogation, and opportunities for me to yell at Seth more and more, because Seth dropped his annual tiers, 5 tiers. 125 players. That means odds are some of your favorite players didn't make it. Some of them are in tiers you are not happy with, and it is causing tears. You see what I did there? That's good stuff, Seth.
Thank you. I hate your favorite team.
Oh, I mean, we all do.
Front.
Hate your favorite team, hate your favorite player.
Yep.
But Seth, I just want to start out very quickly.
Yes.
What tools did you use for your tiers?
In terms of coming about where I place the players, I mean, if you've seen some of the stuff on the Athletic, the folks behind the scenes at the Athletic did some great stuff graphically in terms of organizing the display. But in terms of how to slot players in, I start from a standpoint of using some advanced metrics. This year, I kind of did a blend of estimated plus minus, which is created by a former member of the Jazz front office, and then regularized adjusted plus minus. We can get into what's in those things, but basically it provides a decent balance, I think, of sort of floor time impact and box score stuff that gives a pretty solid start for where players slot in the league. And then I adjusted from there, because that doesn't tell us everything. These are very explicitly looking at how a guy will perform in the or is likely to perform in the playoffs right now in terms of driving championship value. So regular season play is a part of that. But as we've talked about a bunch, including last week in our mailbag episode, regular season and playoffs are different things. There are players who are better in the regular season or better in the playoffs. I think that there's definitely some people who are a tier or two higher than their regular season numbers might suggest, but that's because they've proven it in the playoffs.
Yeah, and we're going to get into some of those guys, because I do have some complaints, Seth.
Sure.
There's no way we did this without me finding a way to yell at you or complain with you. But I liked one of the things I liked that you had in the tiers, and it was in the tier 5 section, was kind of outlining all the different things. And one thing I found interesting was you call it the sophomore bump, because I've always dealt more with the sophomore wall. But you go ahead and hit me with the bump, because I want to talk to you a little bit about the sophomore wall as we get through this, because I find that a little bit. I think I disagree with you there a little bit more.
So yes and no. I mean, there definitely is we've definitely seen situations where a guy's numbers, a guy's shooting percentage, what have you, might drop in their second year. But in general, I think that rookies tend to be bad, and it's not because they don't make shots, although it can be. It's more that adjusting to the speed and physicality of NBA play, rookies make lots of mistakes. So if you look at impact metrics, I mean, if you make one mistake that costs your team 1 point for 100, one mistake a game, the extra that you learn to not make going forward, that is a massive. That's close to 3 wins a season, just like eliminating that kind of one mistake a game. Probably from the amount most players play, it's probably about 2 wins per season. But that's the difference between rookies and sophomores, is especially the first couple months in the league, things are happening too fast. You're in the wrong place defensively. You're shooting when you should pass. You're holding the ball when you should 0.5. You're not taking an open 3 when you should. And as players learn in the NBA game, those little things start to get ironed out. And so even if sort of the top line numbers might drop as a sophomore player, those mistakes tend to go away also. And that's, I think, where the sophomore bump comes in, because they're just not going to do that shit anymore.
Yeah, but I also kind of look at it as also teams have a better understanding of who that player is.
It's a great
And
point.
now, especially the ones that are more the high usage ones, like Paolo
Mhm.
Banchero is a guy who I'm going to be very interested to see how his sophomore season goes. Not because I don't think he's good or anything, just now teams understand. They have film. They know how Jamal Mosley's going to use him. They have an understanding of that stuff and so on. So I think that's the interesting thing to me with the sophomore bump versus the sophomore wall. I don't think one is right or wrong. I just think that's part of, some of the stuff there. But I know, knowing that you're using the sophomore bump to kind of weight some of these guys up, uh, help you kind of evaluate the rookies from last season is something that I kind of just was like, all right, well, there is that wall kind of comes in a little bit. And we saw it last year with, I mean, everybody we felt like was fair or unfair was upset with Scotty Barnes, with Evan Mobley, some of the major rookies that we had that we didn't feel like we got the major lift out of them that we thought we might possibly have.
I thought that was much more fair with Barnes than it was with Mobley. I think Mobley was pretty damn good last year. Sort of the improvements we wanted, and I talk about this in the piece, the improvements we wanted to see from him were largely on the offensive end. Okay, well, you also just traded for Donovan Mitchell. So when is he going to get a chance to show those things, since you now have, in addition to an all-star point guard and Darius Garland, now you have another one. So it's not like he's going to get a lot more reps in his second year than he did in his first. And he was just excellent defensively. So I'm not sure what more we could have reasonably expected from Mobley last year. Barnes, I think it's fair to say, um, did he take a step back, or did he did he plateau? There wasn't the trajectory that I think we would have liked to see, and certainly the Raptors would have liked to see, given some of the reporting on how highly they valued him in trade talks.
Yeah, or the Raptors could have actually put together an actual plan in terms of what they were going to try to do as a team for a season. Instead, they just completely sucked. But that's a whole story for another time. Go listen to the Daily Ding. I think our colleague Jared Weiss, and Eric Corinne had a conversation about the Raptors. So go check that out. See a lot of that interpod connectivity there, Seth. I'm on fire today, baby. But speaking on fire, what fan base did you think was going to be most upset going into the tiers when you finished everything? You're like, oh god, because we know the history with you and the Knicks and RJ Barrett. Was there one fan base where you're like, oh crap, this group's going to be really annoying about whatever?
I think the three that I was sort of most for, I guess, the three teams were the Knicks again, just because it's a tradition, and I have some friends in kind of the Knicks blog world who were of course going to take the opportunity to tweak me a little. The Bulls, in large part because I think I'm lower on Zach LaVine than most, and the Pelicans because Brandon Ingram has consistently been a player I've been lower on than consensus, and then just in general, having LeBron in tier 2, which I frankly haven't gotten that much blowback about yet, but I was sort of anticipating hearing about that, just because I wrote this in the piece. It seems almost sacrilegious, but I think it's time.
Well, okay, so let's just do that because that was one of my questions leading up to it. Why did LeBron fall to tier 2? I mean, like, what's what was the numbers and metrics? Like, how did you come to, hey, LeBron's no longer a tier 1 guy?
You can see, especially in some of his defensive metrics, I think we've visibly seen sort of the effort wane. The best way I can put it is that, like, he's an any given night player where he used to be an every given night player. And I think that's kind of the difference. I mean, you know what you're going to get from, the tier 1 guys by and large. It's going to be, if not every night, most nights. There are going to be a lot of nights where LeBron can still dial it up and do it. But I think we saw a little bit in the playoff series against Denver. I mean, they were out talented, but he ran out of steam. I mean, he's 39. He's played 66,000 minutes.
Right.
Like, it's not.
He's old. He's old, folks. He's old.
It was good. It's going to happen at some point, and I think at this point we kind of have to. We have enough seasons of that, and the fact that he's now picking up little niggling injuries, which didn't happen early in his career. It's just he started to at 38 hit that spot in his career where it's just it's not going to be like it was.
Yeah, and he's 2A, so that's the important thing
Yeah.
people need to understand, right? It's A, B, and C, so he's in the top of tier 2, so like probably just missing the cut of tier 1. But I agreed with you on that, Seth, with that assessment of LeBron. I think that's that time, and it's impressive to have been a tier 1 guy for as long as he has. I know you've only done this the past. This is your fourth one.
Fourth one. Yeah.
Yeah, so the past 4 years. So like, but if you had done this
It's
longer, he'd been up there for a
15
while.
years,
Yeah,
15-ish years. Yeah. That's
easily.
yeah.
You know. Okay, so let's get into some of the debates, and we're going to kind of go like in the way I was reviewing these things. So I went, tier 5 chronologically, or worked my way up. I don't know. Who cares? Klay Thompson in the same tier as Jordan Poole.
I think Jordan Poole's probably a better player than he showed last year. I think that Poole is the more controversial person in that spot than Thompson at this point. I mean, ACL plus Achilles plus age. He's not
Plus
the defender
playing with Poole.
Plus playing with Poole. It's true. He's not the defender he used to. Doesn't have the ability to find shots in quite the same way as he used to. I think that Klay has probably gotten to the point where he isn't. I don't think that on a night-to-night basis he has star impact anymore. I think he's still a good, useful player, but this is part of why we've thought that the Warriors have been on the clock the last couple of years. And even though they won the title a couple of years ago, we kind of wanted them to move some of their younger players for immediate help. I think we saw this coming with Klay, with Draymond. Steph has largely held steady, but I think that it's that impact, which was always a little weird with Thompson, in that his reputation always exceeded his metrics to a degree. I think that with the Warriors having been, I don't want to say hollowed out, but not having the all-around talent that they had in the KD years, the fact that Thompson isn't able to step into that larger role, I think shows that like top end, that was always sort of just behind the scenes, where he could always, we need it. And Klay just gave us a 33-point half or something like that to win a playoff game. I don't think that's there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he had a rough playoffs, but I think I still think he's working his way back. I think part of it was playing with Poole. There were a lot of times where Poole would go look for his own shots and things like that. Klay would come off screens and he'd be wide open. I actually think this is part of the reason why I think the Chris Paul in the second unit with Klay instead of Poole and Klay is going to be huge for him. I think that's going to help him get to those. Listen, 33 points and a half is kind of absurd, even when you're on a freaking roll. But I think, we might get like a 12-point quarter from Klay, in the second unit with those, with the looks I think he's going to get from a guy like Chris Paul and so on. So I disagreed with you there. I probably would have had him in somewhere in tier 4.
That's fair.
In that regard. I rate him higher than Poole. I think Poole he's going to have a magnificent season and score a ton of points and might even be super efficient. But he ain't going to help you win games. He proved that many times.
Not the way he played last year. I think that to some degree, I think we do have to say that there are reasons to maybe give a mulligan on him not being in the greatest headspace last season. If we're gonna be,
I wonder why. Seth. Yeah, I wonder why. Was it a little hazy after he got cold cocked?
I mean, but he's got to work with that person every day. I think that was not an ideal situation, and it's probably gonna be a while till Jordan Poole gets a chance to test himself in the playoffs, if we're gonna be honest. So we'll see. But I think he is a good player who had a bad year.
I'll go a step further, though, because even before the punch and stuff like that, he was not good for them in that playoff run when they went to the finals. Right. And like they couldn't play him down stretch of games. And to me, that's one of those things there where it's like you could play Klay down the stretch of games. And I think that's one of those instances there. And again, why I would have him higher and a different tier than Jordan Poole is I don't feel like Poole has fully proven that, at least to me, with all that stuff. And that's my just And by the way, these are all quibbles. Like these are
Yeah.
I don't feel like you got anything massively wrong. Oh, actually, no, there's like one I think I'm going to really
Okay,
go
well,
at you on.
no,
Well,
I think honestly, like the line between tier 5 and not in the tiers. I mean, these are guys, tier 5 are guys that give you a little bit of extra value, like maybe push you over the top, but aren't the reasons you're there. And so the line between that and sort of more of just a guy is thin. And if we're being empirical about like where the cutoffs would be, tier 5, it could end at 110, it could go to 140. We've just for purposes of sort of continuity at the Athletic have done it at 125 every year. So if there's a guy or two extra who's in there, or a guy or two who should have been in there, yeah, sure. I mean, I noted the last 5 guys out in the article, and then someone like Kyle Kuzma or something like that. If you wanted to say that he should be in there instead of Poole, sure. I wouldn't argue a huge amount with you.
Was there anybody that didn't make it that you're like, kind of felt like maybe he should, or you thought he probably would when you started this project?
Kuzma is one. I think he had a pretty good year last year, and then as I dug in more, I kind of kept down and down and down.
Yeah. And then he completely sucked in your mind. Okay, great. Moving forward.
That's not how I would have put it, but okay.
Yeah, no, that's how you put it. That's how I heard it. This is Seth's 125 favorite players in the NBA. The rest of you all suck. All right, I got a question in tier 4.
So, but actually, can I say like one of the hardest things is, and we talk enough offline that there are players who I, for whatever reason, either for rational and sometimes irrational, don't really like, and trying to balance sort of that distaste for a more objective sense of where they actually are was pretty tough. There are some people I like. There's a few players that it's like, I can't believe you put him in the tiers at all. It's like, well, I don't like him, but he does some things that are pretty good. So I had to balance my hater nature with a bit of objectivity.
Your hater nature is very strong, though, Seth. I have noted this many times. But going back to your hater nature, why is Karl-Anthony Towns in tier 4? Listen, I know injuries and things like that played a role last season, but I still think he's a very important big man in the league. Like, I don't know. We still have to wait and see how winning turns out for him, but like I thought tier 4 was a bit low, and 4B too, not even 4A.
I mean, I think that you hit on it. Winning. I think that first of all, defense is always going to be an issue. I mean, at the 5, he presents some problems for you, and at the 4, he had limited success, shall we say, alongside Rudy Gobert.
But isn't that just a product of like the team kind of like he shouldn't be guarding 4s. Like, we know that. And that's why the trade was kind of so dumb. Like, how much of that are we like some of the stuff that we ping players on is really roster construction and team management doing having a wild sense of like, oh, Karl-Anthony Towns can guard 4s.
Well, if he can't guard 4s and is a bad defensive anchor at a 5, where does that leave us? And I think that he's not the only player who sort of fell in that. I think a better player than him, and it's reflected by being in 4A, Domantas Sabonis has it's similar reasoning. Maybe you could argue that Towns' shooting gives him more of a role as a support player than Sabonis is, and maybe, but I think we've also seen that in postseason settings. Would you agree with me in saying that we've seen Towns almost try too hard, with turnovers and foul trouble and some really really kind of silly offensive fouls that have plagued him in playoff and play-in settings over the last couple of years? That's being able to count on a guy is important. And I think there's some other players who are below where talent would suggest. And it's getting a penalty for, I don't know if I could rely on you in that setting. And I'll be honest, Towns is a player who falls into that for me as well.
Yeah. Okay. I'm fine with that one. I'm not going to really die on that hill. Sure. This next one, Seth.
Oh boy.
Here we go.
Oh boy.
Tier 3.
Hit me.
What's Mikal Bridges doing in tier 3? No, seriously.
Okay.
No, seriously. Like, this is, I know he put up big numbers when he got traded to Brooklyn. I know everybody this and that. The team still finished 12 and 15 in the games that he played in Brooklyn once he got traded there. Got swept in the playoffs. Like, it's like, what are we like? Come on, man. Like, were we really like?
Okay, so he was the best 3-and-D player in the league. And then he gets traded and it's only 27 games. He's in a primary role. He's 60% true shooting, 30% usage. Do you know how many players in the 3-point era have ever done that over a season? And I'm not saying he did it over a season. He did it over a third of a season. Well, there's only 25 guys who's ever done that over the 30 some years we've had the 3-pointer. So, admittedly, may have kind of been looking for a reason for him to, the line between tier 3 and tier 4 has always sort of been the role player barrier for me, but his ability to get shots. I mean, he was already improving that in Phoenix, his ability to get his own shot. And then, yeah, maybe it didn't always work for the team, but I don't know what else he could have done. Am I getting a little ahead of myself with him because he's a player that I've always kind of been in the tank for? Possibly, but
more than possibly. Stop it. More than possibly. You're human. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay if you that. But that one shocked me because to me, this is Jeremy Grant 2.0. He's a better player than Jeremy Grant, but same concept. His best role on a team, and you talked about this in the tiers about like, hey, like his best role is going to be on a championship team, a 3-and-D guy who can put it on the floor, maybe be a third option at most, and things like that. I think we saw Jeremy Grant put massive numbers up with the Pistons, and I don't think you gave him as much love in the tiers when he was doing that with the Pistons. I don't remember.
I mean, Grant. I was impressed that Grant was able to go from a sort of a fourth option in Denver to a first or second option in Detroit and be at roughly league average efficiency. Bridges has always been a very efficient player, and the fact that he's not going to keep shooting the way from 3 that he did in his time in Brooklyn, but the fact that he was able to take on a huge role and be super efficient, that's the part that's different, I think, between Grant and Bridges. Now, if that doesn't continue and he's a league average, if he has a huge usage league average efficiency next year, you'll see him back down in tier 4. But if he's able to, guys who can score efficiently on high usage, that is the most valuable skill in the NBA.
Yeah, but we've seen guys get hot for 30 games. Yeah. We've seen guys get hot for 40 games. Like it's like, what would be an interesting number to go look at that, what you're telling me about having a 60% true shooting percentage on that type of usage in 20 or 30 game segments. And let's see how often that's happened. And then go from there in that sense. We both know, listen, the number is going to probably go down just because it's a crazy number, just by sure of 82 games, assuming health and everything, in that sense. But it's like, I just think we get too hyped off of what we saw there. And then it's just a little bit frustrating for me, Seth, because in some tiers, for some guys, winning matters, but for other guys, it doesn't. Like there's an element of that where it's not. This is my problem with it. He, to me, should be a tier 4A guy, like all the way. He's not. You got to prove it to make it to tier 3.
Fair enough. It's a perfectly credible argument, but again, as I said, he was sort of straining against the limits of tier 4 already, despite being, in being the new version Danny Green. In honor
shout out to Dave.
Shout out to Dave.
His ears perked up somewhere.
I'm prepared to be proven wrong on that one, but I think that we know he can be a great supporting piece on a winning team, and he's shown indications of being able to maybe. I don't think he's ever going to be a first option. I don't think that a championship team you can build with him as a 30 usage guy, as a 26 usage guy, next to a. Look at the guys in tier 1. You're telling me that if he's the second best player next to Steph or Giannis or Jokic, that's not a championship core?
Yeah, I am telling you that. Okay. I don't think that is. All right. Not. I need way more proof.
Fair enough
than that. And I love him. I just think his role. I think we do this with guys, players, and I've talked about this before. Some players are perfect in the role that they're in, can do more, but in the role they're in is perfect for a championship situation.
Yeah. And I'll cop to being inconsistent on the fact that my preference is to be a year late rather than a year early on a guy. And I think that Bridges and maybe one other player are counter examples of that. And so
who's the other guy?
Oh, Wemby,
who was you normally don't rank rookies,
mm-hmm.
and he was in tier 4.
Mm-hmm.
What was your reasoning behind that?
He's in my basketball lifetime starts 91-ish. That's the first finals I can have actual memories of watching. So in that time frame, there are the sort of the Mount Rushmore, if you will, of prospects are LeBron, Shaq, Tim Duncan, and I think Wemby as a prospect goes on there. So that's step one. Step two is most rookies are, because we talked about, have problems, and he will have them too. Just between his physical gifts and his movement ability, he's going to be an impactful defensive player from day one. If he can shoot the ball, if he can score at all, I don't think it's a stretch to say that he will be a top 75 player in the NBA this year. I know that's a big call. And I was not doing this exercise when Luka came into the league. I think I probably would have had Luka in the tiers too. So it's like, there's a list of maybe 10 players over that time span that I would have considered to say, even as a rookie, I think you're going to be at this level. And he's on there. He's amongst them.
Credit to you though, is I saw him there at 4 and wasn't, whoa, what the hell, Seth? You're out of your mind. I'm in on Wemby. I think he's going to have some moments. I think he's going to struggle. I think there's going to be stuff that we're going to see from him where we're like, oh, wow, this or that. But I'm actually fine with that because I think he is in tier 4. I think that's a fair spot for him, and basically above a guy like Klay Thompson in that sense. Is if Wemby is that type of prospect, he will play at that level, I think. And I agreed with you on that. So credit to you on that one. No credit whatsoever on Mikal Bridges. I'm just going to tell you, you are wrong.
Fair enough. I mean, it's one of my favorite players in the league and was one of my favorite prospects coming into the league when I was with the Bucks. So yes, I put on my big old bias hat there and couldn't take it off. You got me.
Fair enough. I knew I caught it. I knew it, Seth. All right. I got something here. Now in tier 3, you have Kyrie, Irving, and Trae Young in there. Now I actually agree with you for the reasoning behind it. It's not skill. It's not basketball. It's literally, can we trust these dudes? Go into that.
We're trying to win a title. Are you going to be there? And with Kyrie, I mean, that's a literal question. With Trae, I think it's a little more figurative in terms of, I think we're at the point where we can say that one guy can't win a championship. Like Nikola Jokic couldn't get that deep in the playoffs on his own. And he is like
the best player in basketball right now.
He is. I think you can make a very credible argument that he is the best player in basketball. And we've talked about this a ton, the ability to adjust your game, to accommodate playing with other good players, to build synergy, to build a team that is robust and flexible enough to deal with playoffs. I think we haven't really seen a lot of that. I mean, just the deactivation off the ball, the defense, the 18 seconds on the shot clock. My guy just scored on me, so I'm going to pull up from 30 shots. Like those are it. I struggle to get past those. And while that's still in his game, no matter how impactful he might be over 82 games, you get into the playoffs and I just think it's easier to deal with.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you for sure on that one with Trae. With Kyrie, it's just a question of like, dude, I don't know what's going to happen. What's the next thing? What's the next issue? and whatnot. And listen, if Kyrie's on the court and has a season where there's no issues, he's definitely a tier 2A guy as a player. And I think skill wise and whatnot is just all that other stuff on the side tends to hurt him.
On top of which, I mean,
hurts the team.
Even aside from that, I mean, he's a guy who also gets hurt a ton. And I tried to assume health for the most part, but a guy who's only going to play 50 games a year because he only plays 50 games a year, you have to take that into account. It's not like
Seth.
Oh boy,
you walked right into my trap.
Okay, you're gonna hit me with Kawhi now?
Yes, you walked right in. The door was wide open. I wasn't sure. I said Seth might avoid it. No. And then and so Kawhi in tier 2. When we just went through, you can't trust Kyrie, you can't trust Trae Young, you can't trust Kawhi.
That's why he's not in tier 1.
I don't know why he's in tier 2. Unbelievable player, amazing, but he's never on the court.
So the way I think about it is this: you're trying to win a championship. You basically need everything to go right. Things going right for a team with Kawhi on it in terms of him being on the court. You have the guy who, no matter who you're playing, you're in a situation where there's a chance we got the best guy in this series. There's no matchup in the NBA where it's the Clippers with a healthy Kawhi, and I'm sure that the other team has the best player. I think he has, and that just having that chip and chair is pretty powerful. I mean, it's in a poker analogy, you're drawing live essentially with that. That's sort of the basis of my rationale there. Understanding everything you're saying, but on like skill and production when he's on the floor, he's a tier 1A player. And that unreliability drops him down a full tier for me.
Said a key word there. When he's on the floor, it's just he can't stay healthy. And it's not even just playoff runs. Like he barely made it through the Toronto Raptors finals when they won the championship. Like he dragged that knee. He dragged that knee all the way through. It's like, and it was incredible. And you're right. Like when he's on the court and healthy, like what he did in that series with Phoenix, we were like, wow, this is amazing. But there's always the injury. There's always something coming with that. And it's just, we haven't, like the Clippers they got 1 year where they got a healthy Kawhi. And that was the pandemic year. And make no mistake about it. In my opinion, those 3 months off kind of helped him, in that sense. But it's like, that's the first time they got him the first year. That since then, not been right ever since. And it's just like, I just don't know. I think we give him and the Clippers too much credit because his teammates also in tier 2 and his teammates always hurt.
No, I mean the Clippers need some stuff to go right in terms of those two guys being on the floor. But again, if they're on the floor, and maybe it's a unicorn right now. The healthy 2 months with healthy Kawhi and healthy Paul George. Maybe that's asking for something that can't possibly exist. But who has a better starting point than that? Maybe, Denver with Jokic and Murray.
You know what? I'm at the point now. And part of me, this is probably my bias, just tired of giving the Clippers the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. They've lost that, and I've given it to them way more than I should over the years.
No, that's fair. But again, the way I'm thinking about it is you need to get lucky to win a championship. Which teams, if they're lucky, have the highest peak?
Yeah, but you can never say Clippers are going to get lucky. You can never count on that. Having worked with that organization for 6 years, no, luck is always bad. Like it's always against them. They win despite of their luck sometimes.
If it wasn't for bad luck, they'd have no luck at all.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you this question. If James Harden destroying Daryl Morey in China this week happened 2 weeks ago, would he have dropped from 2C to 3A.
He'd have been right there in that group with Kyrie and Trae for the same reasons. Yeah, no, I mean we've sort of had these locked for 6 weeks or so to make sure that the presentation was ready, and yeah, that was not the. I wasn't wild about seeing that this week. It's like this couldn't have happened next week, but at least it happened early enough that I was able to acknowledge that had it happened a little earlier, I would have adjusted. And I think, we hit on all the reasons, talking with, maybe the manifestations are slightly different, but it's the same thing.
I question for you.
Yes.
And it's a bit unfair, but a player gets traded mid-season, kind of like Mikal Bridges. Role changes and things like that. I'm looking at Damian Lillard, assuming he doesn't get traded before camp or before the season begins. He gets traded mid-season or whatnot. How does that affect your view of them in the rankings? Because then your roles change, your expectations with the team's different. Everything that goes with it. How does that affect the rankings?
Well, first of all, they're not rankings.
Excuse me. Sorry. Y'all don't understand. He even yells at me in text messages when I say rankings.
I think Lillard is I don't know if assuming that the Heat would be the destination, I don't know how much his role would actually change. The circumstances might he have better teammates around him, but he'd still have the ball in his hands a ton and be the, a late game guy and stuff like that. No, it's hard because so much of what a player does is based on their context and role that you have to take into account that to some degree. Now, sometimes that's an opportunity. And I think that, Bridges never had the chance to show that he could be a ball in hands guy. I don't know what more he could have done in Brooklyn over that time span. And your position is totally credible in that. Well, okay. Yeah.
And correct.
There's no way in 27 games it could be enough, but, I mean, it's sort of for Lillard specifically, it's more a little bit, we'll see where he is as a playoff difference maker, where he hasn't really had the squad around him for that to be, a live question for the last, I don't know, since the bubble, basically. Like he was not good in the bubble playoffs, in part because he had to play 8 playoff games to get in the playoffs.
Right.
That year, if you remember,
it was insane. It was insane.
And so he basically had already played 2 rounds by the time they got to the Lakers, and so he didn't have anything left. But we haven't seen, it was a little bit like we kind of like bring Jamal Murray back and Jokic will be fine.
Right.
And then, but Jokic had something to prove last year because we'd been saying that, and then he went and did it. But if he'd had a mediocre playoffs and they'd gone out in the second round, it's like maybe we were wrong about that. And so Lillard getting to a situation where he's on a team with those expectations, it gives him that opportunity, but it's also the challenge and the possibility that it could go the other way, and then we have to adjust our thinking accordingly.
All right. Well, let's move on to tier 1.
Okay.
All the names you would expect in tier 1. Steph Curry, Giannis, Joel Embiid, Jokic, excuse me. Should have been the first name I mentioned, by the way. Denver fans, relax. You put Luka in there, and I'm almost ready to say he should have been 2A. And part of it is he was good. He had that sprained ankle right after the Kyrie trade, kind of kept him out, kind of hurt the Mavs' chances. But I feel like there should be some sort of punishment when you tank the last game or 2 of the season to ensure a draft pick. And I think, and I understand that's management. I'm not killing Luka in that sense. But I don't know if Luka deserves to be 1B. I don't think he deserves to be in the same tier as Joel Embiid, who's 1B. I can't remember everybody else on. It's
Kevin is the third player in that group. So it's KD, the Embiid, and Luka with Steph, Giannis, and Jokic in tier 1A.
All those other guys, playoff guys. Luka, not even playing guy.
Luka has been good enough in the postseason, despite a pretty woeful job of team construction around him. that I feel confident that you put a championship core around him, you give yourself a chance to have success. I mean, consider that, okay, there was Porzingis, but he was hurt. Brunson just ascending and got a lot better once he got to New York, who did the exact same things as Doncic, and Kyrie, who also does basically the same things and is, in that unreliable tier, are the only quote unquote star teammates he's played with. Other than that, like, who have his best teammates been? It's been like Dorian Finney-Smith. I like Dorian Finney-Smith. He's a guy who I had rated highly before this year and kind of fell off a little bit, and so is not on the tiers anymore. But it's like the Mavs have, well, Luka's got all that, so we're just going to get a bunch of pure role players and fit them in around him, and that works for the regular season. But then they play in the playoffs, and they are just so out-talented by everybody they faced in the postseason that it's are we asking too much to say, well, he should be able to beat the Nuggets or whoever else single-handedly? They haven't played the Nuggets, but like I think we saw it against the Clippers 2 years ago, where it was 2 or 3 years ago, where like they like the Mavericks, largely on the back of Luka, like gave the Clippers everything they wanted. But then because the Clippers had some other guys who could do enough to get Kawhi to the end of games fresh, and then Kawhi just towards the end of that series, like Kawhi dominated on both ends of the floor. And that's was both a testament to where Kawhi was at that point, but also that the Clippers had enough guys around him that they didn't need him to throw a shutout every night. Whereas the Mavs basically are asking Luka to pitch every third day and throw shutouts for them to have any chance.
Yeah, I hear you. Still two-way to me. If we're going, like, you're projecting forward more, I'm looking at past.
I think he has been good enough in the playoffs in situations where, like, is there a series they've lost they should have won?
Oh no, I agree with you what he's done in the past, but I also felt like last season he, especially down the stretch, they faltered a lot, and some of it is roster construction. Some of it, I mean, Seth, go back to those end of games with him and Kyrie when they couldn't even get a shot off. Like that, to me, that's not tier one. That's just my at the very least, not 1B. Put a 1C in there, Seth. There were no 1Cs in there. At least make him 1C.
So yeah, I mean, you're basically equating him to someone like a Jason Tatum by that argument.
Yeah, I mean, no, but I think
that's credible. I
kind of think that was his year.
I think that's credible, though I will say this is not based just on 1 year. This is based on sort of a longer body of work.
Their career, and things like that. I get it.
Yeah.
But I think last year was really damaging, and I think he's got to have a monster season this year. And I don't know if the Mavs are good enough to facilitate that, and so on. Seth, I'm gonna ask you 2 questions here. Okay. First off, when you finished your tiers, you got all the ranking stuff, tiers done, and got it organized and got everybody where you wanted it. Was there something that surprised you? Like you looked at it going like, this guy's higher or lower than I thought, or this guy didn't make it, or I'm surprised this guy made it. Like what were some of the surprises that you kind of like when you finished everything were like, oh, wow.
So my first pass, I always have too many guys too high. And so the after that, it's a process of almost the when in doubt, push them down is I think how I've described it before. And yes, why didn't that apply to Mikal Bridges? You've made that point.
I'm done. I'm right. I'm right. Okay. I'm correct. Yeah. You're wrong. We're moving on.
So that, I mean, I don't think that's a surprise, but it's always just sort of it's always a little sobering. It's like, okay, first of all, there's just a lot of talent in the NBA. So it's like you have a mind's eye of he's a top 20 player. And then you look, actually, no, there's 30 some guys who are probably better than him. and that happens kind of frequently. So that's one. I don't know if I have. I think the other thing that is, I think my evaluation of the place of a center in the game has evolved. I think that in general, there are some guys who in the past I would have Brooke Lopez, another player who I'm, obviously biased in the tank for, but I probably would have had higher based on both skill set and the year he had last year, except for sort of the pure non-ball handling five, I think is a less valuable archetype in today's game. And I think I've taken a little bit longer to come around on that than some. I don't think it's useless. Obviously, he's still a tier 4 player. Lopez is still a tier 4 player. Yeah. But that affected other players like, Jaren Jackson, Bam Adebayo. Also, I think when I started this, they were in my first pass, they were in tier 2 and they ended up at the top of tier 3, kind of because of that, very good defensive.
I'd have killed you if they were in tier 2.
Well, I felt the pain. Yeah,
you saved yourself some yelling.
Yeah, so I think that's just the degree of how much like I've come to internalize that elite shot creation is the thing for the most part. Now, it's important that we say elite shot creation because on the flip side, the players who I tend to be lowest on relative to consensus are pretty good shot creation, because that switch from pretty good to elite, there's a huge gulf in value there. And so that's why there's almost a split. Like there's a line, if you get above that line, then you're way up. And then if you don't, then it's just like, well, now you're just using possessions that if your team had better players on it, you wouldn't get to use and it would be fine.
All right. I lied. I have another. I'm adding another question that I just thought.
You said you had two. So you have one.
Yeah, I know, but now I have two.
Oh, you have two left. Okay.
Now I have two.
You're wishing for more wishes,
as it tends to happen. Okay, who in the rankings now? Or excuse me. Sorry. I should get fined every time I say it. Tiers. Who in the tiers now? It's like maybe in tier 4 or tier 3. You expect to make a big jump next season. Just, I know it's unfair. Early prediction. We're projecting a year from now. Who are you saying makes a big jump?
I don't know how much there is for him to go, but I think we both have pretty good expectations of the Thunder, and Shea is a guy. I think I had Chet Holmgren top of my draft board last year. So if he has a good what's now rookie season, he could leap in at a pretty high level. Those are two. Those are the two biggest ones to me.
I just want to remind you that 2 years ago I told you Shea was a star, and you did. Dave mocked me.
I don't think we mocked you. I just think we needed to say
me.
We needed to see it, Mo.
Oh,
we needed him to prove it, and he did.
I had told you it was there. I knew it. All right, my last question for you, and then we'll wrap it up here. Any questions for me?
Who do you think that I was? Who do you think I was the lowest on relative to where you'd been, and who do you think I was, aside from Mikal Bridges, who was someone you thought I was crazy for where I had him in terms of being too high?
I think for the most part, Seth, I'm going to give you a huge compliment, and I just want you to take it and move on and not really do what you normally do, which is then try to be self-deprecating. I think you kind of nailed it. Like there weren't any that were really glaring to me. I mean, besides the stuff I brought up, there wasn't anything that really made me go nuts. I think you're a little bit low on Klay, but we talked about it. But there isn't anything that really kind of caught my eye where I was like, damn, what the hell is Seth thinking that I didn't bring up here in this conversation? So for the most part, I think you nailed it. And for those that don't understand, this is a ton of work in putting these tiers together for Seth. Like he agonizes through these decisions. So, I know he really kind of puts a lot of effort in. It's easy for us to all kind of come in to yell at him. It's fun for me because I get to do it to a friend, and it's always I yell at him for anything. So this is just gives me a new excuse. But for the most part, I think you nailed it. I don't know. I'm sure other people will disagree with me. Um, but I think that's the deal. I think you nailed it, buddy.
Cool. Can I say one more thing before we sign off
No,
here?
no.
I just want to give a huge shout out to Rob Peterson, my editor, for helping. This ended up being like we were trying to make the writing of this shorter than it's been in the past, and still ended up being 13,000 words somehow. So thanks to him. And then Mark Mazzoni and his team behind the scenes at The Athletic, who I think if you haven't checked out the pieces, I recommend you do so. Did some really, really cool stuff in terms of being able to navigate and filter and stuff like that on the various tiers. And I'm really happy with it's actually stuff that Mark and I discussed doing way back in January 2020, and then some things happened that kind of got in the way, and
Like what?
Yeah, exactly. And so we glad we were able to we were able to make that happen, and I'm really happy with how it turned out visually, as well as from a content and tiering standpoint.
Well, Seth, take a bow. Your team, everybody, take a bow. You guys did a great job with all of this stuff. That's the end of the podcast. Make sure you're checking out all of our podcasts on the Athletic Podcast Network. Jared's doing some great stuff with the Daily Ding. Everybody's rolling around, and you're going to be getting all the different feeds coming through. And hey, guys, we're not that far from the season beginning. That's Seth Partnow. Thank you, Seth, for again coming through and doing the tiers. Andrew Schleck produced. Thank you. By the way, Andrew always has his hair perfectly brushed. Like, I'm very jealous by that. Andrew always looking sharp, producing on the ones and twos. And shout out to Dave, who could have joined us tonight. And hey, guys, see you next time.